So how did you like the chimes? Are they wonderful? They're expensive. They're expensive to maintain, but you know, that's part of the tradition, legacy here at the Basilica of St. Mayor of the Angels and taking care of these beautiful gifts that we've been given. Next up is going to be Pastor Dan McDowell. You know, our parish has enjoyed friendly relations with the Olean Baptist Church since 1851. And we know this.
You're that old?
We know this from the Baptist Church's history book that they wrote in the 1950s. Well, anyway, in that year, 1851, imagine the first Bishop of Buffalo arrived in Olean and he had absolutely no place to say Mass. It was the Baptist who offered Bishop Timon their church. And then about a year later, the Olean Catholics purchased from the Baptist trustee this very property upon which the Basilica sits today. We are honored to have the former pastor of First Baptist Church join in our celebration tonight. He comes to us from Phoenixville, is that correct, in Pennsylvania? Thank you for making the trip, Pastor Dan.
How tall are you, Greg?
6'3" and 3/4.
All right. I was going to say, there are not many pastors that I look up to, but I moved to Olean in 2002, and so you were still breaking in, Father Greg, at that point. But one of the first things that I noticed was that there was this Catholic priest who was constantly walking everywhere, all over town. I would see him walking on all of the sidewalks, all over Olean, and I wondered what in the world is going on with this priest. And eventually, I came to learn that he was working the city. Now, to explain that, time went on. Father Greg came and introduced himself to me, and that in and of itself is an unusual thing. I can tell you, as a Baptist pastor, very rarely has a Catholic priest come up to me to initiate a relationship. I don't know if that has to do more with Baptists and the way that we run our mouths, or the way that Catholics tend to avoid Baptists who run their mouths. But he came and welcomed me warmly, began a friendship that lasted throughout my 15 years of ministry in Olean, and in many ways blessed me. Along the way, we had some colleagues, and I'll tell you, your brother's toast really moved me. Not every church aims to take care of its ministers, and two of our colleagues were going through some rough times, and we talked about it, and we decided mutually that we were going to invite these colleagues to have lunch with us on a weekly basis, and just so that we could sort of hold up their arms, and during that time, more and more pastors throughout the community joined us every Thursday at 1 o'clock at the Beef and Barrel restaurant. It got to the point that sometimes we had as many as 20 pastors that were gathering there. And oftentimes we would meet in the back of the restaurant near the parking lot, as always, and we would start heading through the restaurant, and as we headed to our table, we would all of a sudden notice Father Greg was missing. And we would look around and say, where did Greg go? And he was always talking to somebody who was at one of the tables in town, or in the restaurant, and visiting very warmly and cordially with them, and at the end of every meal, Greg would pull out a gift card. Rarely, in the 15 years that I lived in Olean, did I see Greg pull out anything but a gift card at the end of our meal together. And we started, inquiring about that. And he gave us, as always, Greg does, the sage advice. You guys need to learn how to work a room. We harassed him mercilessly about that over the years, and to the point that we guilted him into buying our meals with his gift cards. So on behalf of the clergy of Olean, I would just like to thank St. Mary of the Angels congregation for taking care of your pastor and ours. I don't have to tell you what a phenomenal spiritual leader Father Greg is. You know that from personal experience. It certainly was more than a surprise to me that he played the accordion and that he has the many different gifts that he does. But it wasn't long after I arrived here that our congregation went through a crisis as one of our key members found themselves in trouble with the law, and we felt very much alone and traumatized by the experience, and Greg stood beside us through that. I remember he sent flowers to our congregation in the midst of it, and just the brotherhood, the sense of family, the sense of friendship is unforgettable. It is something that I will remember for the rest of my life. Greg is more than a great pastor and priest. He is a great friend to anyone who would just open their hearts to him. And it is, I was told when I came here I had 2 minutes to speak. So I understand he was also told when he came here as priest that he had 2 minutes for his homily every Sunday. So I took that into account. But there is only one way that I can conclude this message to a simple country priest, and that is by saying, well done, good and faithful servant.
Thank you, Pastor Dan. Part of the duties of a Catholic priest in Olean includes running over to the hospital at all hours of the night whenever a call comes through to anoint somebody or to console a grieving family. And sometimes the Catholic priest ends up being the patient himself. Karen Full, where are you, Karen? Right behind me, good, is up next to talk about that and Father Greg's legacy with Olean General Hospital. Karen?
Well, what an honor it is to be here today, and I have to say that the girls did a marvelous job on this whole event. It was a wonderful, wonderful event. Thank you. Well, my journey with Father Greg began in a very interesting way, very close to the time that he moved from Lancaster, St. Mary's of Assumption Church, near Buffalo, to Olean. I moved from Olean to Lancaster. And I told people, you know, you meet your neighbors and you tell them where you're from, and they'd go, oh, you're from Olean. Oh, Father Greg went to Olean. And they would describe him as a saint, of course, and a plethora of lovely stories, too numerous to count. But I learned quickly to refrain from saying I was from Olean when one of my neighbors, an elderly woman, came up to me, put her finger in my nose and said, oh yes, the place that stole our priest. But through these stories, I recognized that he made a great sacrifice in leaving Lancaster and this church that he loved, and where he was loved, and where his family was. And in a place that had, you know, a little more excitement than maybe Olean. And he really did make a great sacrifice to come here. No doubt, coming to a rural community, he imagined that there would be haystacks all around. But Of course, that wasn't true, and he quickly embraced the culture and the community, and he started referring himself to as the simple country priest. And so, obviously, it wasn't as bad as maybe you thought it was going to be. Well, Father Greg is always making pastoral care visits at the hospital. And so after a fall, when he ended up at the hospital, and by now we've become pretty good friends, I went to see him to offer support and prayer, because he's a priest, and the priest comes to see the patient, but who comes to see the priest? And so I walked in the room, and he looked really cold, and he had this blanket bunched up around his neck, kind of shivering, and I thought, oh, he must be so cold. And then I looked, and from his knees down to his feet, he had nothing. Now, I have to say he had nice legs, but I was appalled. And so I ran to the blanket warmer. I got 2 blankets. I covered his top, his bottom. Nothing was showing, I guarantee you. And we had many laughs over that. But at that very moment, he said, Karen, I am going to donate money for extra long blankets for tall people. And you know he could rival any St. Bonaventure basketball player. So he made good on his promise, and we bought extra large blankets. And today, we have a gift for you. So we have a 9-foot blanket that Tim and I made. And it has your initials in there.
You stand up there and we'll, you hold the top and I'll get the bottom. Oh my God.
No matter where you go, no matter what hospital you go to, you can take that, it won't get lost. Thank you. You know, I want to close with a very short story, one of my favorite, that has some parallels, not all, but some parallels to the life of Father Greg and his service in our community and at this beloved church. In the early 20th century, there were a group of missionaries called one-way missionaries, and they were assigned in places where they normally never came back from. They didn't pack suitcases, they packed coffins, and they bought one-way tickets to wherever they were going. And there was one such missionary, A.W. Milne, and he bought his ticket, he packed his coffin, and he bought his ticket to the South Pacific to serve a tribe of headhunters, and no one had ever come back before, and he knew that. And he died there after serving 35 years, as he had found great favor with this tribe. And when he died, they buried him in the center of their village, and they erected a stone, and in the stone they chiseled the following words: "When he came, there was no light. When he left, there was no darkness." Father Greg, I would say that you have brought great light to this community. You have even made it sparkle. I love you dearly, as we all do. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Father David.
And I'm Marcus. Well,
Marcus,
what?
what happened to your hair?
Well,
You know, this is a gala for Father Greg. We're honoring him today, and I wanted to get my hair done, so I called his famous hairdresser, Jason Clemens. And I said, can you curl my hair and give me some locks like Father Greg? He said, sure, come in. So I went in, Jason was working on my hair, and I turned around and looked in the mirror and, I look like a young Michael Jackson. A, B, C, as easy as, not like Uncle Greg over there. Uncle Greg? Yeah, he's finally wearing on me a little bit there. You know, I'm kind of liking this guy, I think. So, Uncle Greg, I like when you tell the parishioners to go deep. Yes, they have to go deep in their relationship with God. But when I go deep, I have nothing but stuffing there. Do you go deep, Father David?
Of course I go deep. I go deep every time I get in trouble and big doo-doo with Father Greg.
Yeah, you know, I heard Father Greg telling Sister Regina one day, there he goes again, and he started shaking. Whoa! Anyway, this is leading into a song just for you, Father Greg.
Are you ready?
1, 2, 3.
And now the end is near.
And so he faces the final curtain.
My friend, I'll say it clear.
I'll state my case, of which I'm certain.
He lived a life that's full.
He's traveled each and every highway, 16, 14, 7, 417, and 219.
And more, much more than this.
He did it Malone's way.
Yes, there were times,
I'm sure you knew,
when he bit off,
more than he could chew.
but through it all,
When there was doubt,
he ate it up.
and spit it out. Puke! He faced it all, and he stood tall, and did it Malone's way. We're not done yet.
For what is a priest,
What has he got?
if not himself,
Then he has not.
to say the things he truly feels?
And not the words of one who kneels. We're off key here. The record shows he took the blows and did it Greg's way.
So Marcus, would you like to thank Father Greg for anything?
Of course I would. Uncle Greg, thank you for all those times I could go in the kitchen and eat the candy and eat the cookies and you blame Sister Regina. And thank you for all those generous allowances you gave me the 6 years you let me stay with Father David. Whoops, Joe, I made a boo-boo. That was a secret. Father Greg, I hope your hearing aids were turned on. You didn't hear that one. And I want to thank you for calling me a potty mouth. A potty mouth? Is that a compliment?
I think it is from Father Greg.
Well, what about you, Father David?
Well, I have a few things to say too. Father Greg, thank you for your friendship, your mentoring, your humor at the dinner table, always brought laughs, and your many, many funny stories, especially about your weird liturgical dreams that you would have at night. Sister and I would just look at each other and say, whoa. Thank you for giving me space to be myself and to grow as a priest with my crazy gifts and talents.
You said a mouthful there.
Thank you for the Laurel and Hardy and Abbott and Costello way that we complement one another. I believe so. On the altar and with the people, we have a way, though we're different, and yet we complement each other. We work together well.
At times.
Thank you for being there when my mother died, and my friend Michael died. It meant a lot for me. You were sensitive, caring, compassionate, and you were there for me in my time of need. But most of all, I want to thank you for putting up with me all these years. You said a mouthful. And I know it was not always easy. You got that right. As I made you shake many times when you got mad. Well, Marcus, should we say it? Of course we should. Where is he? Oh, he's over there. There he is. Hello, Father Pat. And the famous words of Father Greg, good luck with this one. Just saying. Thank you.
Okay, from the ridiculous to the sublime. Father Greg has mentioned several has mentored several seminarians here over the years. This includes living with him over at the rectory for an entire year and learning how to be the Wayne Newton of weddings and funerals. At an event at St. Bonaventure University one day, he had one of his seminarians with him, and the seminarian was going through the room introducing himself to everybody, and he walks up to Sister Margaret and says, "And you are?" I direct your attention to the video wall.
Good friends of the greater Olean and Allegheny area, I'm very sorry that I cannot be with you for this very special tribute to our beloved Father Greg Dobson. Greg Dobson, as we all know, comes from the wonderful city of Buffalo. Whether you call it Nickel City or the Queen City or the City of Good Neighbors, we know that Greg Dobson never lets us forget his Buffalo roots and his Buffalo loyalties. And I think it's probably pretty clear to most of us that when he was first asked to come to Olean, to the southern tier, he might well have hoped that this would have been an assignment of short duration, so he could get back to Erie County after a few years in our midst. But as the bishop's wisdom and the providence of God conspired against him, he actually has spent many more years here, and I believe that over time, he also began to see the wisdom of God's providing in his continuing assignment as the leader of the Catholic community here. And the providence of God was really taking care of all of us, not only within the Catholic community, but with a care and a concern that extended well beyond Greg's initial commitments and initial ministry and fundamental ministry to the Catholic community at St. Mary of the Angels. For having proven himself an adept and affectionate pastor, he was destined to become the leader of the clergy of this particular area of the diocese.
Since then, the pastors of this parish have been involved in keeping our precious educational options viable and sustainable. And in recent history, Beth Powers has been nothing less than a godsend for our Catholic schools. Father Greg could not have asked for a more zealous and generous partner at Walsh and Southern Tier Catholic. Thank you, Beth, for traveling from Pittsburgh to join our celebrations tonight.
Well, I have to say I feel a little like a pork chop at a bar mitzvah. I'm following a priest, a nun, a minister, and Karen Foll, who's pretty much in that same category. I'm not. Let me just manage your expectations right now. But I am honored to be here tonight to talk about Father Greg. As many of you know, I am the token diversity speaker here since I am not a Catholic. I am a Methodist. Although, if you're gonna line them up, I guess I maybe step ahead of Reverend McDowell, who's a Baptist. Father Greg never held my Methodism against me. In fact, Father Greg has never held anything against me that happened to him because of me. I spent several years working on Archbishop Welsh Academy to create a rigorous and disciplined environment out of a school that had fallen into disrepair, the sort of classic making lemonade out of a lemon. Father Greg, I think, never expected to be called into service on this duty. He had been the canonical administrator as the Southern Tier Vicar for the Buffalo Diocese. Now, by the way, I probably have all those titles wrong because remember, I'm a Methodist. And I'm sure he was expecting the school to close. When I met him, he referred to the fact that there was something not quite right at that school. Or, as I affectionately began to call it, that damn Catholic school. Not damned, damn. Anyway, I remember in the first 6 months of this project having a lunch with all of the area priests to talk about how we could turn this school around. I've never seen so much animosity in one room. They were done with that damned school. But Father Greg explained to me after the lunch how we can work to regain their confidence and support. I remember consulting with Father Greg one morning at about 6:30 a.m. when he had been called by 2 irate adults. One was an area priest who had heard about some inappropriate goings-on at the school, and the other one was one of Father Greg's volunteers at St. Mary's who had also been involved in a separate incident with 2 or 3 students that incensed him. I was literally in the local beauty shop on State Street with foil in my hair, trying to hide in the bathroom to discuss these issues and wondering why I ever volunteered for this job. Father Greg was calm and comforting and told me it would all work out. I remember sitting with Father Greg in the living room of the rectory with a student and his family, all of them terribly upset about the trouble caused by a nonsensical action that this student had engaged in. You know, he was a high school boy. Father Greg was calm and comforting and set just the right tone. I remember racing to the school to meet Father Greg and the principal when some board member became absolutely appalled by a student's action and our school's response to it. Father Greg and I commiserated on how to manage the situation, and while I was furious about the ridiculousness of it, Father Greg made it all seem like it was just another day. Day after blessed day. And I say that because you can't imagine the number of times I had to call him at the rectory, and I would often receive his answering machine, which says, "I invite you to leave a message. May God bless you." I told Father Greg I sometimes called that number just to calm down after I'd encountered some unsolvable problem involving parents, teachers, community members, board members, and of course students, always the students. Seriously, I was actually blessed, and so was our school. The school that many gave up on, but Father Greg never did. A school that he and I both came to love because it's so special. He supported me steadfastly and quietly, but he also always supported the parents, the board, the teachers, the priests, and the students. How he managed to do all of this at once, I have no idea, but he did. He was a godsend to Archbishop Walsh and to me. I'm a better person for having worked with him, despite being a Methodist. Father Greg, may God bless you in your retirement.
To do whatever he could to solidify Archbishop Walsh in Southern Tier Catholic. Most people have no idea the expertise, the time, the resources this true friend of Olean, this true friend of Catholic education has poured into our parochial school. And he's still integrally involved. I believe he had a meeting today at 3 o'clock. No one knew, including Father Greg, that this person was going to make this dinner all the way from Paris, France. That's a true friend. We are all honored and blessed with your witness to following God's call in your life, Vince. Please welcome former president and CEO of Dresser-Rand Industries, Vince Volpe.
I want to talk about Father Greg, but and I want to first of all correct a couple things that Beth said. She didn't actually volunteer. I've known Chris and Beth since 1981, so if you're counting, that's 37 years. Beth worked for me for many, many years on paper. The only instruction that I can ever actually recall her following through on is when I ordered her to fix Walsh. And that you did together with the board and with Father Greg and others just marvelously. And we all owe you a huge, huge debt of gratitude, Beth. I'm going to come back to that. The good news is I came from France. I'm jet lagged, and if I talk too much, I'll actually put myself to sleep. So this won't last too long. I stopped working at Dresser-Rand after Siemens bought our company in 2015, and I faced very much the same types of things that you're going to face now, Father. What do I do next? After all these years, in my case it was 34 years, in your case it's longer. I'd like to remark that there's 10 years difference. He's 10 years older than I am. And you know, it can be daunting, but it also can be exhilarating. So Christine, my wife, and I, who, sorry she's not here tonight, we actually bought a professional soccer club in France. Had no idea how much time it was going to take, but it's been really a lot of fun. Has nothing to do with compressors or turbines, but anyway, it's a blast. And so, you know, look, Father, you're going to have to figure out what to do next, but have you thought about soccer? Okay. I mean, you never know. You never know. Padre. So, this is our team shirt. We are the oldest club in France. That's a true story. Found in 1872. Interestingly enough, by Cambridge and Oxford. It formed the club in France. And today, if you come to one of our matches, you'll hear French words, but the team song is God Save the Queen, interestingly enough, sung by Frenchmen. So he's got the jersey now. And so we have to assign him a number. Now you're going to be on the reserve squad if you accept this assignment. So we started to think, well, what number could we give him? Well, some of the numbers are taken. So for instance, number 1 is for the team captain, who's also the coach. He trains 6 days a week and rests on the 7th. Let me know if you catch on here. The number 2 jersey goes to arguably the best player on the team, by a mile. In fact, some say he's so good he walks on water. And the third guy, number 3 on the team, is so fast you can't see him. But you know he's at work because every time he gets the ball, it goes in the net. So the best we could do for you is number 4. I hope you'll take that in the spirit in which it was given. Okay, now, just for a couple of minutes more, indulge me, please. So Beth didn't volunteer. She was asked to do this, but it quickly went from a request to her just charging full speed ahead. But it wasn't a request from me. It was a request from God. And so the story is really quite simple. I got a phone call because I was on someone's list. Our older daughter, Stephanie, had gone to Walsh. And it was Father Barry that called me, in fact, and said, we need some money. And it really wasn't a lot of money that he was asking for. So, you know, I take the phone call and being curious, I started asking him questions. Well, you know, how's it going down there anyway? You know, it's, well, you know, not that great. And I mean, it went on and on and on. And then I started asking a few other people in the community about what was really happening. And it was not positive, okay? And I'm understating this. And so I started to think to myself, well, why should I give anything to the school? Because it's not going to be here next year. The rate they're going, it's just not going to be here. And so I went to sleep one night, couldn't sleep, just kept going over this. And then a second night, same thing. And then a third night. Finally I said, Christine, I can't sleep. I can't turn my back on this school, and I don't know why. The reason why is because it was God's will. It was first and only time in my life that I experienced truly a miracle. So, what do I do next? Well, now I'm not going to be on the first elevator to heaven, I'm pretty sure. Don't laugh so much, Audrey. It wasn't that funny. No, but I mean, other people chuckle, you're just breaking at the seams. It is true. What is equally true is that I have had a long friendship with the Canes, and so 1 or 2 days later, Jenny and Steve, who, by the way, Jenny has done a marvelous job here in the organization. Thank you. I told them about this and said, I can't turn my back on this. So they called Father Greg and he came over. This is a true story. It's almost like it happened yesterday. It was now more than 10 years ago. And I said, you know, I'm willing to do something. I'm not really sure what it is. I said, but are you on this thing? Are you going to stick with this or not? And he said, yes. He said, we need to talk to Sister Margaret next, which we did. And we started to get ourselves organized, and we went and tackled the bishop and said, look, don't pull all the money yet. Okay, we're not done. You haven't heard the last gasp of breath from Archbishop Walsh. And the reality is, a lot of good things started to happen. We still have tons of things that we have to do at the school. Beth has done a magnificent job. The board, headed by Paula now, doing a terrific job. Father Greg has been a constant. I listened to Sister Margaret's words. I didn't realize you were trying to get out of Olean that badly, but about halfway through this, he got called back, and the next thing I did was I called the bishop. Said, you're not taking him out now. I said, we're only partway through this thing. You need to leave this person with us because we cannot do this without him. We cannot do God's work without his instrument here with us. As simple as that. And so Bishop Kimmick reacted positively and left you here to stew for a few more years, very much to the benefit of all those who have had the pleasure of working with you. And so, without going on and on here, I think most of us that have gotten to the end of our whatever we did for 30 or 40 years have the sense of we're done, what do we do next? But leaving a legacy is quite important in my mind. And so one of the things that what Christine and I, my wife, who's sorry she's not here, is we've decided, Father, that we're going to start a scholarship fund in your name at Archbishop Walsh. And it's a 5-year deal. And what we expect is that we're going to be calling everyone in the room. And we expect, this is the part where I ask for money, it's $1, it doesn't matter. The point is, if you believe in what Father Greg has done for us in this community, and you believe in the value of a faith-based education where academic excellence and discipline and respect for one another are important, and if you believe that working with children from the kindergarten level through the IB diploma now at 18 years old will help create productive, kind people in the society, then you should step up to the plate and help carry on the legacy that Father Greg has worked on so hard, as well as others, for a long period of time. So Father Greg, it's with great pleasure that we open the scholarship in your name. And we do very sincerely hope that those of you that feel the same way we do about what you've done for the community and the value of that educational experience, we hope you'll join this fund so that it will live on a lot longer than me and Father Greg and really everybody else in this room. Thank you for what you've done for us as a school, as a community, and for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. That is tremendously generous, and we thank you and Christine for that phenomenal gift and the establishment of the new scholarship in Father Greg's name. Thank you again. Let's give him another thank you. I'm going to do I'm going to do the thank yous at this point, and then I'll introduce our main speaker this evening. And you'll see why as this all transpires. But first of all, I want to thank, we're so grateful for so many people who put this evening together for us. I have to start with Bonnie Stark and Wendy Filbert, because they're in our office staff, and they just do a phenomenal job, and I love them to death. And thank you. They're going to work tonight, selling coffee cups and stuff, so they're back there. But thank you so much. And we also have Mary Marks and Marion Morgan, Varma Childs, Kathy Baker, Buzz Winkie, and our stage manager tonight, Paula Snyder, thank you. And Brenda McGee is joining us on Facebook. And she helped us a lot from Florida with our programming tonight. Audra Deering is doing the live Facebook feed of this event. And then also our Olean Police Department, you know, they're wearing ties tonight, and they said we don't do this often. And they did out of respect for Father Greg. Thank you. Thank you, please. Our jazz trio tonight is always, as always, Les Savina, Jan Rohde, Moses Howden, terrific. Thank you, folks. Susan and Joe Mara, again, fabulous dinner, and the terrific wait staff. Everybody did a great job of Old Library events. Thank you. And finally, for the magnificent ambiance under this tent tonight, you know, Kathy Bachman also came in today and spent lots of this day doing a lot of this decorating. The mastermind behind all of this, again, is Lisa Stephen, and thank you, Lisa, for everything. It's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Father Greg needs no introduction, and I'm not going to introduce him. That's not why I'm here. In 2015, Father Greg had a nutty idea. He wanted to petition the Vatican for minor basilica status. I mean, okay. He approached the bishop with this idea, and he gave a grand total of 22 reasons why this particular church eminently qualifies for basilica status. The bishop heartily endorsed the idea, and then the Vatican application came in Latin, of course. We translated it, or the Franciscans translated it for us. David Flood, thank you. 119 points of inquiry. One of the points said, provide a brief history. Okay, what's our history? Well, what we had was about 2 typewritten pages. It was very scanty. It was of an unknown origin. There were no citations, and you can't send something like that to the Vatican that you can't verify and you can't document. So the search for our authentic history began, and that was 3 years ago. Well, along the way, we made, didn't we, some fascinating discoveries about this parish community, the people here since 1850, so we're 166 years of history here. We uncovered a gold mine of amazing people and their stories that had been completely forgotten. Our history is intricately intertwined with the history of Olean in so many ways. You can't think of this city without thinking of this community and its involvement since 1850. And it's tremendous pastors that we've had. You know, we've only had 8. 8. Since we were assigned our first resident pastor in 1876, he is the 8th. Father Pat will be the 9th. That is remarkable in and of itself. You should read about it. It's really remarkable. And previous to them, we had the wonderful 20-year history of the Franciscan friars who took care of this parish from St. Bonaventure University. Our pastors for this mission church here were all presidents of St. Bonaventure University. The first 4 were our pastors. One went on to be a cardinal, Falconio. And these were remarkable how they took care of this community. They built the first church here. They named it St. Mary of the Angels. That is a Franciscan name for a church. And we are grateful for the Franciscan heritage, but we didn't understand how that all worked historically and how they fit in and what exactly was their life here and how they did all that. But we can only give the Vatican a brief history because that's what they asked for, and we were able to give them a very nice brief history. But what are we going to do with the rest of our rich heritage that we discovered? Leave it on some laptop somewhere? Hide it away in our archives or in some folder somewhere? There's the story of Thomas Merton's experiences in our church. There is Monsignor Nelson Baker. You know him as Father Baker. And the wonderful things that he said here, he is the first to preach in this church at this pulpit. He blessed and opened this church in 1915. Where did our magnificent windows come from? Well, we discovered that the best fruit of that Vatican application process was our history. And we decided to compile everything. We're going to throw it all in a book, and so that these amazing people, our ancestors, will never be forgotten to history again. Father, it's been 3 years. It's been an amazing journey of discovery that you instigated. And when Bishop Colton blessed the cornerstone in 1913 here, he declared this house of God as a place set apart. And so tonight, I want to present something. This is something that is hot off the presses. I'm glad that turned off. This is hot off the presses this week, as a matter of fact. The first ever fully documented history of the Basilica of St. Mary the Angels. It's published, and you get the first copy. You see the cover? Father, take a look at the cover. This is a picture he likes. This is a picture of transition. You see the old steeple? He named this picture. It's called Three Steeples. It's a picture of transition. You see the old wooden Franciscan church steeple on your right. Then you see this new one being built. This is the summer of 1915 that this was taken. And it's kind of emblematic of Father's life too. I mean, this whole thing of transition, the theme tonight too. And so anyway, this is a tremendous photo for the cover. And you'll notice on the dedication page.
Welcome to my world.
You probably can't read it, but it's dedicated to the Very Reverend Gregory J. Dobson, VF, the first rector of the Basilica of St. Mary the Angels, with gratitude and devotion and esteem. Thank you.
Well, what do I say now? Very little is probably what you're thinking. Thank you for being here. If I can pull this up. I'm more comfortable like this. Can you hear me better? I think you should. Thank you for being here. Vince, thank you for that surprise. You know what Sister Margaret says about you? No. When an Italian boy thinks Jesus is talking to him, it changes the world, just like St. Francis. So she's putting you in that category. So, hey, accept it. Italian boy hearing Jesus talking changes the world. Thank you for coming, and thank you all. You know, my brother told you that story about my dad the first time he was here. And they came and said, Dad's really upset. He thinks the bishop made a mistake, and you're not going to know what to do. Talk to Dad. So I did. I went over and said, Dad, don't worry. I've got people. And I pointed to the people in the church that day. Dad, don't worry. They're going to take care of everything. And as I stand up here tonight, I say, you have been my people. You have taken care of everything. And for that, I am so gracious. My brothers and sisters from the ecumenical community are here. Now, they've been coaching me how to talk about my ministry and my change in ministry. And I was using that perfectly good word with strong Latin roots, transitioning. And they kept cautioning me about that because Caitlyn Jenner changed the meaning of that word. And they said, the Allegheny Franciscan Sisters, I think you're going to want to join them. Sister Margaret Mary, don't worry, I won't put you in that bind. I'm moving on in ministry. I will always be a priest. I will be involved in all sorts of things. But speaking of that group, you know, one day, just a few weeks ago, I walked in to the Beef and Barrel. I was heading to our table in the back, and one of the waiters said, Father, you're going to be missed here, you know. You really fit in well. And I said, well, I'm just a simple country priest. Of course I would fit in well here. Now, when I got back to the table, I was tempted to tell them that story. But then I know Pastor Bruce Levine would be grousing, you fit in well here because you have all those gift certificates. Tell the truth. When Dan said they pick on me about this all the time, it is an understatement. But you know what? Keep the gift certificates coming. You know, shortly after I arrived, I knew this was a special place. My time in the hospital in the first month, this was a special place. My first spring year, my first salute to Olean, my first Friends of Good Music concert. The Syracuse Symphony was playing at the Olean High School. Are you kidding me? It happens in Olean. And the Moscow Chamber Orchestra and a lot of other great performers from all over the world. And of course you all support Friends of Good Music and the symphony, of course, and you never clap between the movements of the symphony. If I have any legacy, may that be it. But I wrote to Bishop Mansell. And I wrote to him and said, I don't know who advised you to send me to Olean, but you need to know that was wonderful advice you received. Keep that advisor close. Now, I think it was Sister Margaret Mary said, all you've got to do is say that and they'll transfer you right away. So that was going to assure my ticket out of Olean. No, and he was smart enough to say, no, maybe sometimes bishops do the right thing. And he made a perfect fit here. And just a few weeks ago, I received a letter from my 8th grade teacher. I've been reconnecting with people in my life, particularly former girlfriends. And it just happens, you know, you get to a certain age. And my 8th grade teacher, whom I had sent a gift, wrote me an acknowledgement. And she said, I'm so happy for you because you finally found your niche. Now, as an 8th grader, I was a misfit. I did not fit in any of the groups. And she was always solicitous about me. She was always concerned that I didn't fit in. But she wrote in that little note something quite poignant. Yeah. You finally found your niche. It took 56 years to do so, but for that, I'm grateful. Now, I'm going to ask Father Pat Melfi to come up here. And Sister Regina, would you bring the first box up? There are 2 boxes. The first box is coming up, Sister, the little box. Because I'm going to do some important declarations. So, Sister, give me my first symbol. Whenever I say something official around here, I have to be properly chapeaued. All right. Now, Father Pat, Well, that's okay. The folder can go. At one of the Olympics a number of years ago, Greg Louganis won all sorts of gold medals. And at the end of those Olympics, he had already come back to the United States, but he was called back because he was going to be given the Sportsmanship Award. And I have used this story for many years. For all sorts of years, literally dozens, I have spoken to high school graduates. And I've told the story of Greg Louganis. I've even written to him to tell him how I was touched by his words. And they asked Greg Louganis, he won all these gold medals, wins this special award. They say to him, well, what are you going to do now, Greg? And he said, words that come from my heart to you. I'm going to step back and watch this diminutive younger man do the most incredible things that I have never even imagined. Sister, will you bring up the second box? Now, let's be honest, Pat. You and I have different gifts. Just as Greg Louganis and that very diminutive Chinese diver who won the silver medal. Sister's bringing up the next gift. You may need to have a certain flair. We're going to have you work on a certain flair, all right? And this is going to be the first gesture. So Sister has something that I want to share with you to help you do and know that you have the responsibility of doing the most incredible things. I have been saving this young man for you. Step forward. It's a Galero. It's quite becoming. It fits you well. And it gives you a little bit of flair. All right? That's the deal.
I'll wear it all the time.
All right. But I'm telling you, I'm going to step back and watch you do incredible things as you merge together our parishes and you link them and do all the things you need to do to build the community here, to keep, as I've warned you already, there are certain concerns that we have. We're placing them in your hands, and there are lots of people here. What I'm telling you, Pat, you have people. Does he have people? It's yours to keep. I'm not taking it to Gowanda, because I'm sure there's one up in Gowanda waiting for me already. Thank you. And finally, and I mean finally, many of you remember Monsignor Bill Gallagher. Bill Gallagher took me aside not too terribly long ago and said, you know, Greg, your first parish is like your first girlfriend. Now leave it to Gallagher to come up with this, but he said, you're infatuated with your first girlfriend. You see something that is really special, and you measure the rest of your life, all the women you meet, even your own wife, by that standard. Now, I'm not sure where Gallagher figured this all out, but I mean, after all, I don't think he's married, but anyway, he said, you never know these days, but he said, having your first parish will always be your first love. And I need to tell you here in Olean, you are my only parish, and you will always be my first love. I'll be loving you always. always. When the things we planned need a helping hand, I will understand. Always, always. Things may not be fair, always. That's when I'll be there, always. Oh, not for just an hour, not for just a day, not for just a year, but always. Oh, not for just an hour, and not for just a day, not for just a year, but always. God bless you all.
In the sanctuary the past 22 years. As they approach the stage, I ask everyone, please look under your gold charger. They left that on the table on purpose. Look under your gold charger. You're going to see lyrics to tonight's song. The cantors will sing this song. They're going to sing the lyrics through twice. On the second time they sing it through, I ask that you raise your right hand in blessing over Father Greg. That's the second time through. Okay, we'll do that. Okay, we're standing, and this is appropriate because he prefers that the prayer be in a standing position, a posture.
May the sunshine warm